Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Susan Welton, Oracle Marketing Manager at Perficient, and I'm excited to be moderating today's webinar, Oracle FCCS, a Deep Dive. We're very fortunate to have two key members of our EPM team on the call today. They're going to set the stage with an in-depth look at FCCS. They'll touch on product direction and then wrap up with migration considerations. Two questions always come up with our online events. Can I get a copy of the slides and a link to the recording? The answer to both questions is yes. We will email you with that information on how to access both slides and the recording following today's event. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Santosh Nair and Tony Kaufman. Santosh is the General Manager of our Oracle EPM practice and is responsible for sales, strategy, and product delivery. With nearly 20 years of consulting experience in EPM, ERP, and BI, he has helped countless clients across a myriad of industries implement financial solutions to drive value with their technology investments. Tony is Director in Perficient's Enterprise Performance Management practice. Over the past 2 decades, he has advised clients how to implement modern finance solutions to drive greater performance. He is a certified specialist in the Oracle EPM Cloud products, as well as Hyperion Financial Management and Hyperion Planning 11 series. Santosh and Tony, welcome.
Thanks, Susan, and welcome everyone today for the webinar that we're going to talk about FCCS with. As Susan mentioned, I'm with Perficient, and I want to give you a little bit of background about Perficient. Perficient is a leading digital transformation consulting firm serving the Global 2000 enterprise customers throughout North America. We provide technology, management consulting, and along with our digital agencies, some creative consulting capabilities. A little bit more information about Perficient and a quick profile of Perficient. We were founded back in 1997, and we trade on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol PRFT. Last year we had annual revenues of about $487 million and approximately 3,000 colleagues worldwide. We do a lot of different things here at Perficient, but for this webinar we're going to focus on our relationship and partnership with Oracle. With over 17 years of relationship with Oracle, we're a Platinum Cloud Select partner with 15 distinct specializations. We have offices throughout the country and 2 offshore centers in India and China. One of the key things to take away from this particular slide is our 95% repeat business rate. This means that nearly all of our revenue comes from clients that we've already done work with in the past, and obviously they would want us back given that we have a good track record there. It's a key metric that our executives track each year, and it's how we ensure we do stellar work for our clients. So just drilling down just a little bit about our Oracle practice, we do have a couple of different pillars we focus on here at Perficient. We're going to be focusing on EPM today, but we're also an ERP, BI, and customer experience partner within Oracle. And live to date, I think we're somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3,000 implementations in our customer base in North America. As I mentioned, we are a Platinum partner with roughly 15 specializations within the Oracle ecosystem and have a heavy industry focus around healthcare, supply chain, energy, financial services, and consumer markets. At the bottom there, there's just a few awards that we've received over the last couple of years from Oracle. Drilling one level down into our EPM capabilities, this is the team that I've been managing for the last 16 years or so. And historically, this practice has been focused primarily on the on-premises environment over the years. And about 3.5 years ago, Oracle introduced the first EPM application on the cloud, and we've seen a significant shift to our business in terms of the amount of implementations we're deploying on the cloud. And as more and more products and features are coming out from Oracle, we see this as a strategic way of growing our business and continuing to help customers with a lot of their performance management challenges. And from a capabilities perspective, we really focus on areas such as cloud readiness assessments, strategy engagements, implementations of all the cloud applications, migration strategies on how you should take your current on-premise deployments and have a roadmap on how those might be migrated up to the cloud, as well as things like infrastructure and high availability and things like that that you may already be deploying in your on-premise deployments. All of those are capabilities we have within a single organization. And then last but not least, from an Oracle perspective, we are a fully certified, approved education center on behalf of Oracle University. What this means is we can deliver classroom training at our facilities or at your facilities. They could be instructor-led. They could be virtual, meaning you can attend classes from your office where the instructor may be at another location, as well as custom education and learning vignettes that are easily deployable for cloud applications. The other nice thing about this feature that we offer is that you're able to leverage your existing investments in Oracle learning credits and pay for classes to Perficient with those learning credits. So it's a key differentiator we have among many of the other Platinum partners from an implementation perspective. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to transition over to Tony Kaufman, who's going to walk us through the deep dive of FCCS. And during the course of the webinar, we'll be taking questions and to save some time at the end to address questions, whether it's related to the applications, Perficient, or just any other questions that may come up. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tony Kaufman.
Thank you, Santosh, and thank you, Susan, for helping kick us off here. And welcome to everybody that's on the line. I appreciate you carving some time out of your busy schedules to attend our webinar today and learn a little bit more about FCCS. When I was planning this webinar, thought a little bit about the timing, and that certainly played a role. We're about a month away, 6 weeks away from the K-Scope conference. We've got obviously Open World, the big conference in October coming up. I always like to do a webinar about this time of year to help, if you weren't able to attend K-Scope and or unable to attend Open World, we be able to fill in some gaps, and hopefully you can learn a little bit about the product, maybe at a little lower level of detail. So that's kind of the goal for today. I've got quite a bit of content, both sort of broad, and we'll pause on several slides to get much more in depth. But that's the goal, and just a little bit more about my background. I've been at Perficient 7 years. Run again our enterprise performance management practice, specifically around consolidations and close. But my experience goes back quite a ways, 15 years in Hyperion. Spent some time delivering many planning projects, S-Space before that, BI, and even before that, led large ERP implementations. So all told, that's a lot of time in front of spreadsheets, and I wish I had $100 for every penny I reconciled along the way. Wait, check that. I wish I had $1,000 for every penny. So with that, let's take a look at the agenda for today. So we want to just kind of give a quick background, and we're going to cover several different areas around the close cycle in this particular product, and talk a little bit about what we've heard from Oracle as far as product direction. In fact, have a slide from them that really was from K-Scope. We'll talk about specifics about migrations, and it's always in any type of webinar like this with products rapidly evolving. We want to focus on what's in the product right now at a point in time, but we also want to look a little forward and let you guys understand what we've heard and what we expect to be in the product soon. And then just considerations about migrations is always a function of where you're coming from and what your sort of ERP landscape is, specifically with the close. But we'll hopefully allow some time, 5-10 minutes, get several questions in related to some of this content. And so if you've got questions, just type it into the chat window, and we'll try to get to them. So with that, we want to take a quick survey. I think, last I heard we had quite a lot of registrations for this, and this would be a little sort of micro sampling of the as this product sets that are out there still today, and what you might be coming from. So if you want to just select as many tools that you use today for your financial consolidations and reporting, I'll go ahead and head over to the results and see how that's coming in. You can see sort of real time. not much enterprise. That's got a little bump in enterprise. So quite a few other solutions out there. But clearly HFM and Excel in the lead as far as consolidation tools. So it's not all that surprising, and that kind of lines up with the theme of our presentation today, comparing FCCS to HFM. But obviously, you can translate features in the products that you have today to this as we go along. So with that, I'll move on to our next slide here, which if you're going to move to a new product, obviously you've got to purchase it, and so with the need to purchase, you need to have a salesperson. And what's the first rule of sales? It is sorry, mechanics here. Always be closing. However, what's good for sales is not necessarily good for accounting, right? We don't want to always be closing. We want to have a better package, a better solution, more automation, more control over the close cycle, and more transparency along the way. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the suite and how that maps to FCCS, right? So if you're not familiar with the financial close suite, this is a simplified snapshot of it, but it was really several different products bundled together as a license item. Hyperion Financial Management for the Consolidation Engine, Close Manager, Account Reconciliation Manager, Supplemental Data Manager, and Financial Data Quality Management Enterprise Edition. Those products, which are on-premise today, for the most part map to two cloud services, FCCS and Account Reconciliation Cloud. Talk about what is FCCS. Well, it's many of the elements on the left side of the screen that I just mentioned. It's Smart View integration. It's mobile ready. There's no infrastructure cost to speak of. And backups and patches are maintained by Oracle. What FCCS is not is it's not HFM on the cloud. It's quite different. It shares the platform of ePBCS and PBCS on the back end, right, which is essentially the data storage is in S-base. It's got pre-built dimensions, which HFM did for some of the standard dimensions, but none of the customs. And what FCCS is not is it's not full parity with HFM yet. It's certainly evolving there quickly, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the presentation. What we probably won't have time to cover today is anything related to licensing. That's easy to get from the Oracle website or your salesperson. We're not going to talk about some ARCS or the Account Reconciliation Cloud. That's a domain in and of itself and worthy of another webinar. And we're not going to talk about some of the other cloud services like EPRCS and TRCS, which are for reporting and for tax provisioning. Even without that, we've got quite a bit to cover, and we'll just jump ahead. So if you were to log into an FCCS freshly minted instance, this is what you would see. A home screen, which is, again, mobile ready, very much like a smartphone feel, with icons that are intuitive rather than mashed together on a toolbar and difficult to tell what they do. These are obviously more intuitive. You can click on a cluster, which is what you see on the left. Application is a cluster. You click on that, it expands, and you see individual cards, right? Overview, calculation, settings, and so forth. Now this is an admin level view, so we see essentially all the cards available. It's always a good practice to streamline this down to the minimum that are needed for a given functional role. And it's highly customizable, so the navigation flow is very clear, and you can rename these individual clusters and cards. Obviously, with the sort of mobile-ready user interface, works on any browser. So if we just jump ahead up to the top left of the screen, what you would see is this Navigator menu, and it's a very handy consolidation of all the sort of administrative functions of FCCS. You can see in the application group things like overview, calculations, and settings. I'll draw your attention to some other things here, like let me pick my pointer again. If you can see that green pointer, I'm hovered over the dimensions. This is where we manage our dimensions in FCCS, or one method. Over here we've got an area for rules, right? Down here you can see we've got a consolidation grid for data status by entity. Obviously a common function for most administrators to tell where they are in their close cycle, or at least what the consolidation status is. And we've got another area right here on the left for valid intersections. This is where we would set up valid combinations of across dimensions like we would with HFM with the custom top members, right? So again, collecting all the sort of administrative functions into one area rather than having to jump through multiple screens and multiple windows to get there. So as I said at the outset, FCCS combines many products that were in the Financial Close Suite. The first of those is Close Manager. And this is an example of a very slick calendar that if you didn't have Financial Close Suite and you only were running HFM, something like this was virtually impossible. You could publish static calendars through Excel to the workspace, but otherwise not much help at all. This, however, is very slick. You can have period-specific calendars with deadlines, tasks, and assignments to the individuals. These feed task lists, and those feed compliance dashboards, which show the various statuses of the tasks that people have been assigned. We move ahead. An example of a fully loaded task list. This is a bit dated for 2015, and this person's a little bit behind schedule, but you can see that we've got different sort of aging on the tasks and various objects on the left side. These are actually supplemental data forms for debt details, investment form, payroll details, and so on, which again have been fed from both Close Management and Supplemental Data Manager. So links to the compliance dashboards. Moving on, we've got obviously many HFM administrators would be familiar with locking and publishing data. That's also possible within FCCS in a very similar grid type fashion. You can see here that January is unlocked and February is not started. Over on the left, we see the calculation status grid that I mentioned earlier, and Oracle has simplified sort of the calculation statuses to fewer and more meaningful words. Instead of CN and TN and those types of codes that you're familiar with in HFM, it's obviously more clear where things stand for a given entity, for a given period. So just to kind of recap, so Close Management in FCS includes Close Manager. It does not include Account Reconciliation Manager, which was bundled with the Financial Close Suite. Account Reconciliation Cloud Service is a separate service. FCCS allows you to lock and publish data. Workflow such as process control is not GA yet, so if you use that in your current HFM implementation to have various review levels and workflow and approvals and validations, that is not GA or generally available. you can still have delegated consolidations to a business unit controller or group controller via security groups. So let's move on to dimensions and metadata management. So we've got on the screen now is just a sort of a mapping of HFM standard dimensions to FCCS standard dimensions. And one thing to know about FCCS is that it is essentially building on 30+ years of consolidations, best practices. It started back with microcontrol and evolved into Enterprise and HFM, and essentially consolidating a lot of best practices into a pre-built set of dimensions filled with members, some of which you can tailor and customize, and attempt to account for all the typical problems of US GAAP or IFRS consolidations, right? So from a mapping perspective, we've got our standard dimensions in FCCS of scenario, year, period, entity, account, and intercompany. These are almost identical to HFM with a few exceptions. The value dimension is now called consolidation, and the view dimension gives you your periodic quarter-to-date and year-to-date views. 3 new dimensions are included in FCS. They're called data source, movement, and currency. And today you can have a max of 2 custom dimensions depending on whether or not you have enabled the multi-gap option. If you have, you can have multi-gap +1. If you haven't, you can have custom 1 and custom 2 named however you'd like. One of the things that we expect to be announced in late summer time frame is the ability to extend the number of custom dimensions. There's some customers out there that have taken full advantage of the number of custom dimensions available in HFM to provide a lot of different reporting. There's again sort of a trade-off there in terms of performance, as well as being able to satisfy and predict what essentially should be a pre-built solution with the ability to tailor. So from our perspective, they've solved with the 3 extra dimensions of data source, movement, and currency some of the typical design things that we would add to just about any HFM implementation anyway, while still providing a couple extra custom dimensions for various types of analysis. So moving on, we've got a comparison here of our consolidation dimension back to value dimension in HFM. So essentially this value dimension in HFM has been split into 2 dimensions. You have in the HFM world the buckets of entity currency and parent currency, which were essentially pointers down to the currencies also embedded in the value dimension, right? Good implementations of HFM would typically not expose a lot of these system members enclosed in brackets and braces, but design forms and reports using the currency numbers. Same practice is a good practice in FCCS. However, they're across 2 dimensions. If we want to just drill into a little bit of the consolidation of FCCS, you see here we've got this FCCS entity input member. This is where your base entity data goes, right? Goes up to total, has a similar proportion bucket there, similar elimination, and a similar contribution. And just like in HFM's consolidation, if you have a parent with 3 children, the 3 children would eventually have a contribution total which gets summed together and put into the FCCS entity consolidation bucket, right? So you have this sort of loop of consolidation, and depending upon where you are in the entity dimension, you can pull those values out. At the same time, in the currency dimension of FCCS, we have members and buckets over here for different purposes. Under the input currencies parent, we have our actual currencies, USD, Euro, GBP, and so forth. If we tag that currency as a reporting currency, it will also appear under reporting currencies. These members in red, entity currency and parent currency, are used for calculations to then populate the reporting currencies. The FCCS consolidation dimension also has members for submitting overrides. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And one thing to note is today, parent members in the entity dimension can only accept input not through this entity input member, but through a journal. Moving on, we've got to look at our customs, right? So FCCS has a data source dimension where we've got data input, we've got journal input, supplemental data, which is linked to the Supplemental Data Manager forms, and a bucket for intercompany eliminations and a few others. You can add data source members if you want to track things at a lower level of granularity, by ERP or by country, what have you. In the movement dimension, this is almost in all cases a custom dimension we would have created in an HFM app to essentially track our movements and produce a cash flow statement. This is also key to the design of FCCS. And you can see there we've got a closing balance, an opening balance, and a movements total. Underneath movements total are individual members for movements cash, movements AP, movements AR, so on. And we map our balance sheet accounts to the children that are under movements total. We also map the income statement accounts to a member called movements net income, right? So with this information rolling forward in every period, we've got the ability to populate cash flow accounts, which are under FCCS cash flow. And I call them accounts. They're really not in the accounts dimension. They're just members to essentially collect all of our cash flows into buckets that we can then present on a cash flow statement, especially where we want a sort of a crosswalk, if you will, between the balance sheet accounts and the cash flow accounts, right? So that, I'll move ahead to another very important dimension, the accounts. And as I said, we've got pre-built dimensions here with pre-built members, and you can see them there on the left. And effectively anything that begins with the prefix FCCS is a pre-built member. And if you are a planning customer, this might look familiar to you, and some of these words like data storage. If not, I'll do a quick explanation. So at upper levels of the account dimension, data is stored as dynamic, meaning that it's calculated on the fly. And if we were to drill into each of these hierarchies and got down to the base level or level 0, their storage is set to never share, which means that it's the data is physically stored at that intersection. What's interesting to note here is that you have a fully built out balance sheet, income statement that you can then tailor. You can add your natural accounts or your consolidating accounts that are more meaningful to you underneath any member that's tagged as dynamic. However, so the example of that would be, let's say, FCCS_sales. If that's a dynamic member, you could add your individual sales accounts below that so that you have drillability all the way down to an account that's meaningful to you. Accounts that are tagged as never share or stored, you cannot add members today under those. So an example of that would be FCCS _ common stock, right? So you're mapping many accounts to one member in FCCS. That may change in the future, but that's the state of affairs today. You can essentially build out, a full P&L, full balance sheet, full cash flow statement, starting with what's here and then tailoring it. One thing to note about the balance sheet accounts is that they're tagged as a flow account type, which is different than in HFM, or they're tagged as balance. And that's because we're actually mapping data into balance sheet accounts at a flow member in the movement dimension, right? So we load essentially balance sheet activity to the system, not life-to-date balances. So just in terms of metadata management, right, with HFM you had 3 options. You got the classic HFM client that could work with XML and APP formatted files. You alternatively could convert your application to an EPMA or EPM Architect application, which had a slightly different format. And finally, you could, if you license DRM, manage in a central repository all of your master data for multiple systems, Hyperion, EPIM Suite, Data Warehouse, so on. In FCCS, we also have 3 ways to do it. We can import sort of a ready-made file directly into the tool. We can use the dimension editor that I showed you on the previous screen where we're looking at accounts. And we can also use SmartView. Just like today with PBCS and the other applications, we can establish a connection to the URL provider, edit dimensions, and essentially submit those back and refresh to the database. So very handy improvement on the way to make quick updates to the metadata. So this is sort of that process. In SmartView, making our connection, we see a list of all of our FCCS dimensions. Step 2, after we've made edits, we submit the data. Step 3, we refresh it to see those changes reflected in FCCS. So moving on to data management. If you're a customer that has FDME or FDM Classic, you'll recognize this screen. It's effectively FDME Lite. So we still have in FCCS, this is part of the subscription. You get to it through that Navigator menu I showed earlier. It's got 2 tabs, workflow, where you can walk a file through the system and load it to FCCS. And the other tab is setup, where we set up all of our import formats and locations and mappings. So from that aspect, very similar in the setup of loading data. There are some differences, though, between these sort of flavors of FDM. And it's in the FCCS world called data management. It does not support VBScript or Jython scripting yet. Does not support direct integration with on-premise ERPs. It's a file-based only, and we'll talk a little bit about more when we talk about sort of migration considerations. It can drill back to on-premises ERPs if they support URL queries, and there will be tight integration with ERP Cloud. And does support lights-out processing using the EPM Automate utility. This is something that is installed on a server that can pass the file to essentially the cloud instance, where then data management can pick it up and load it to FCCS. So from a supplemental data perspective, if you've never seen this, this is a look at the screen where you would define form templates. Again, these are forms that we would typically design in HFM for the collection of supplemental detail, flash information, maybe roll forward information. But to do that through sort of the HFM interface could be linked to task lists, but difficult to track the status and almost impossible, really, at an individual form level. With this particular application, we can design templates, reuse them period over period, set the frequency that they're required. When designing these, you have direct access to the FCCS dimensions. So as those are updated, those rows would be reflected on the templates. And these again can feed to an FCCS task list or be part of that workflow. So just to recap, we link the supplemental data forms to intersections in FCCS, for example, inventory. Design the forms to gather additional details about the account. We can assign preparers, reviewers, and integrators. An integrator is really just whoever is the person that's going to post this supplemental data to the FCCS cube. From the FCCS forms on the FCCS side, we can drill back to these supplemental data forms. And then finally, we can, through the compliance dashboards, there's a separate status bar counter for the completion of supplemental data forms. And that can be seen a variety of ways. Sort of also in the data collection realm is journals. Acts very similar to the journal module in HFM. Here's an example. Under the Actions button, we can have delegated roles, submit, approve, post, unpost. And if you see here, we've also got an option to look at the journal history. This would show us who submitted, who posted, who approved, and when. So great for an audit trail. Differences from HFM today: does not support recurring, reversing, or automatic journal types. However, this is on the roadmap. But does have the same sort of filtering and reporting capability, including the journal history. So certainly can extract your journals out of HFM and load them in from a conversion perspective. So sort of next section here, we wanted to talk about consolidation logic. Oh, looks like that header is wrong. But we, not only do you have pre-built dimensions in HFM, but the idea behind this application is that there are standard calculations that virtually all consolidation apps should have, and they're built into the system. Things like net income to retained earnings, obviously currency translations, CTA, intercompany eliminations, and overrides. To jump to the next screen, we've got a picture of how the net income to retained earnings role works. It's effectively under the FCCS retained earnings member, we have a FCCS retained earnings current. And under that is essentially the primary hierarchy of your income statement. So if I was to expand FCCS net income, I would expand the entire income statement. That rolls up, obviously, on a periodic basis to retained earnings current, to be added to retained earnings prior, and give me my final retained earnings. The same member is shared below under total comprehensive income as an alternate roll-up. From a translations perspective, the system does come with default rate accounts. There's 3 forms for exchange rate entry. You can do it for a single period, for multi-periods. There's another form that shows you computed rates via triangulation. However, with the HFM implementation, we had to create these accounts. We had to create all the forms for the entry. You did have the ability to create spot, historical, or weighted average rates in HFM, and you could do custom translations in Subcalculator to Subtranslate. The system today is a little bit more restrictive than HFM in that regard, but a little bit more advanced in other aspects. For example, because we have our roll forward dimension, getting our closing balances from the prior period, and we have pre-built logic for CTA, we can populate the FX impact as part of the movements dimension. Right, so you lose a little, gain a little, is the way I look at it. On the roll forwards sort of capabilities, do have roll forwards, like I said, in the movement dimensions out of the box. They're valid for all views that you might want to look, and they work for both local and translated currencies. So here's an example of a roll forward for one of our customers. If you look at the first column here, we had a closing balance of 412,258 in December FY12, rolling to the total opening balance of 412,258. Right, we are at the entity currency. This is local. And then below, we've got the parent currency with the same type of roll forward happening. Right, 413 to 413. From an overrides perspective, these are also sort of an out-of-box in FCCS. As I said earlier, in the movement dimension, consolidation dimension, we have members for loading overrides to the system. And as a longtime implementer of HFM, seen a lot of ways this can be done. Some good, some not so good. I like the approach that's taken in FCCS. It doesn't overcomplicate the system, but provides the ability to essentially do an override at any currency, even if you have multiple reporting currencies. That was always the challenge in HFM. You could create the custom dimensions and you could create the reporting currencies, but writing the right value at the right time during a consolidation is sometimes a bit of a bear. The overrides in FCCS work very well. You tag the account that should be overridden as valid for that. It puts it into a particular section of the hierarchy and appears on forms where you can then submit the override amount in the currency that it should be, or submit a rate, say a weighted average rate, that should get you to the correct figure. Clean and simple, doesn't overly clutter the logic of the system, and works for multiple reporting currencies. Here's an example where we've got upper right. This is the member, the amount override member in the consolidation dimension. We've input 63,086,000 at the USD intersection, and it writes to 63,086 at the parent currency. You see here, parent currency. From an intercompany perspective, systems are very similar. Intercompany eliminations are done at the first first common parent. And obviously got the same tags that you set on intercompany accounts, plug accounts, and entities to make it work. First box here is for the data source dimension, right? We've got a bucket in our data source to tell us that this is actually an elimination, makes it easy to report on. And then in the red box is the member for the consolidation dimension. Net between FCCS and HFM, very similar offsetting so that when you get to the parent level, you're at a 0 on an intercompany account. Here's an example of an intermatching report, a little bit easier to read than the HFM version, where we've got our partners side by side rather than row by row. So consolidation logic, one thing to note here is that in HFM you had account types that controlled consolidation behavior. In FCCS, because it follows the S-base sort of model, uses consolidation operators like plus, minus, multiply, and divide, and makes things a lot easier in terms of signage and sign flipping. These account types could often cause heartburn in terms of making forms that look like a trial balance or doing equity pickup type calculations. But it's clean and simple from the FCCS world. And there's calculation proof forms that help validate all the consolidation logic that we just described. They're built into the system. So with that, we're going to take another quick survey. You've heard kind of what's in the box, what's planned. I wanted to kind of get your opinion about what are your top concerns about moving to FCCS, and you can select more than one on this as well. And skip to the results and see how everybody feels. Performance seems to be a concern. Obviously, lack of HFM parity. Time and effort is always a concern on any project. Do we have the people? Do we have the time? So kind of in order, I'd say parity, performance, and effort. All right, well, we want to try to address some of these as we move forward with the time that we've got left. Thanks for sharing your opinions. So by nature, accountants are risk averse, and just like we don't always want to be closing, we don't want to always be brutally audited. See what I did there? Of course you did. It's only 4 letters, but this, obviously, with all due respect to our public accounting friends, they have needs too, and those have been taken into account in the design of FCCS to build on some of the audit capabilities that were in HFM. There's a very easy to use auditing screen here where we tag what we want to audit. Obviously approvals, journals, data, rules, we can track virtually anything that's occurring in the system and enable this just to be running by default in the background. Talked earlier about sort of the consolidation proof forms. These are very useful, dynamic on the points of view. But in this case, we've got a cash flow consolidation proof with our consolidation dimension across the top with the delta, right? Several forms like this for not only the consolidation path, cash flows, balance sheet, so on, make turning over information orders much easier. From a reporting perspective, very similar to the HFM world with the key difference that financial reporting is now Web Studio. It's no longer a client installation. There's also pre-built dashboards for the close overview, close compliance, and standard financials. Here's a look at some of these dashboards. Down in the lower right, we can see our compliance dashboard broken out by tasks and an aging. Here's a look at the FR Web Studio. If you've developed FR reports in the past, you recognize on the left we've got a repository of all reports. We've got a grid where we define our rows and columns, and we've got a lot of options depending upon what we've clicked on as far as suppression, formatting, calculated rows, calculated columns. So same type of reporting capabilities in FCCS through SmartView, financial reporting, but you get the added benefit of some pre-built dashboards that you can modify to your liking. So also from a audit perspective, there's obviously the IT side of the house, and won't go too much into all the certifications and policies that Oracle has in place for data security. Certainly that's highly available on the internet and through your representatives. But from an infrastructure perspective, in terms of security, there's really no investments in hardware at all. There's two clients that typically factor into a cloud implementation. It's the EPM Automate utility, which needs to reside on a server somewhere if you want to have lights-out processing without a lot of coding. You can also have the SmartView add-in installed, obviously, on your local desktops. From a patching perspective, Oracle does all of that. They do it on the first Friday of every month to dev instances and the third Friday to prod, virtually every month. In advance of any patch being applied, there is a release announcement exactly what the patch entails, and you can obviously work with your partner as far as building out a test plan and when those patches should be applied. You have control over what is the window to do that on that day. Oracle handles all the automated snapshots to the cloud. It's always good practice to move these off to permanent storage. If you want more than, let's say, 3 days worth of backups, or better disaster recovery. And then finally, you can integrate FCCS with Active Directory. So here's a look at that. You could click this Configure Single Sign-On button, put in your details. What should we key off in terms of a user's identification, and what field is that in? So this is at least a high-level snapshot of that, and security's a longer discussion. I'd be happy to have that with anybody that wanted to follow up. So just looking ahead, again, I talked about having this from product managers. Rich Wilkie, he's a great guy, know him well. And as a Platinum partner, we feel obligated to also share the safe harbor statement. This is forward-looking, and Oracle, dates and functionality may change as they move forward. So just recent highlights, alternate hierarchy support. You can use that Close Manager tool and Supplemental Data Manager tool on a standalone basis. If you did not want to use it for consolidation, you can still use it for closed tasks and supplemental data collection. Obviously, tight integration with Financials Cloud and configurable translations. So this is sort of the first opening up of the rules, if you will, so that you can do targeted calculations specifically for translations. Some things that are underway are broadening customers' ability to write their custom calculations, adding more custom dimensions, adding advanced consolidations like we have in HFM with the Manage Ownership screen, things like equity pickup, org by period, and so forth, right? Integrated EPM business processes is going to link the different EPM cloud instances through essentially the icons that we saw at the outset of the presentation. You'll be able to register services with each other, and it's pretty much have a seamless navigation path across services. I just did a blog about this, I want to say about a month ago, so you could go out to the Perficient blogs and read up a little bit more on that. Promises to be pretty slick. As I said earlier, process control, not fully GA yet as well. And then looking forward, expanding the journal entry modules with more journal types and making it easier to integrate back to ERPs for things like equity pickup, adjustments, accruals, what have you. Advanced consolidation like automatic journaling, if you're familiar with the sub-consolidate routine in HFM, that's where you would write essentially sort of behind the scenes automated journals. That's not available today, but planned in the future. And then integrating with EPRCS for external reporting. So I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. Let me advance here. Final point about custom calculations. Again, these are going to be at predefined points within the consolidation process. And the library of predefined rules will be expanded to do things like copy and clear and so forth, which given the nature of the multidimensional aspect of both HFM and SBase, important to be able to clear all intersections when you do a clear. So I'll just spend a little bit of time on migration considerations. Obviously with the pre-built application like this, the model, the paradigm is a little bit different. Rather than build everything from scratch, it's map your business process into this tool with limited tailoring. So I would think about it along those lines and plan on a proof of concept, right? For example, Perficient has instances of a dev and a prod instance of FCCS that we use all the time for proofs of concepts and demos. We could take some of your data, put it in the tool, and show you a reasonable demo of what you might expect, in the future. You could see what it's like to pull these different dimensionalities, what it's like to load data, what kind of performance you get, and so on. Next step in the process is obviously taking that sandbox or that proof of concept and then doing a full map gap of sort of business requirements, taking advantage of some of these things that are in the box that maybe you didn't have in your current architecture, like Close Manager, Supplemental Data Manager, and so on. Building all the conversions, all the history, new interfaces, based upon how your ERP landscape is or is changing. Planning on a training event, data validation, and user acceptance testing, finally to the typical parallels of at a month in and a quarter in before you expect to cut over. So, again, you are mapping your process to this tool and finding where you can take advantage of some of these new features. Don't have a lot of time left for some of these slides, but we just wanted to talk about data loads, opening balances. We load at least our retained earnings to a given member, right? So we get our retained earnings year prior. We load our opening balances to a member called FCCS opening balance adjustment. We pull out of HFM our activity for all entities, all base entities at entity currency total. That will give us obviously our base data and our journals by period, by activity. And then finally, we typically will build an interface in data management with our mappings down here, if you see these mappings to the movements dimension so that we have a working cash flow. There's obviously a lot of other topics to be talked about in terms of a migration that we'd be happy to follow up with you after the webinar. So while I've been going through this, I've actually noticed that we have somebody attending today that kind of caught me by surprise. That I've been IMing with him while we've been kind of going through the slides, and he agreed to join me for sort of the next portion here, which is our Q&A. I'm pleased to welcome Rajesh Bhatia, who's the Vice President of Development over FCCS. And Susan, is Rajesh's mic live?
I believe it is, yes.
Rajesh, can you hear me?
Yeah. Tony, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you great.
Okay, great.
Thanks so much for joining. I again, kind of spur of the moment, I'm happy you could join me. We've got a lot of attendees and a lot of interest in what we're talking about today. And wanted to ask you, are you willing to hang out a little bit longer and field some of these questions?
Yeah, happy to help out.
Awesome. All right. Well, I guess with that, I'll turn it over to you, Susan. And, as you ask a question, we'll just kind of determine if I'll take it or pass to Rajesh.
Sounds perfect. Thanks, Tony. So as Tony mentioned, we're going to start the Q&A portion of today's event, and how you ask your question is through the Q&A tab that you'll see in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. So go ahead and just actually type your question for us, and I'll go ahead and read that as they pop up. I do realize we're at the top of the hour and that some of you may have back-to-back meetings and need to leave, but you can feel free to email us as well. Tony gave his email at the top of the hour. And as a reminder, you will be sent the slides and the recording in an email tomorrow, so you can go ahead and respond to that email if you have questions, if you have to hop off. But for those of you that can stay, it's great to have Rajesh on the line as well, so we'll go ahead and get started. We did have a couple of questions that came through actually during the event. And the first one here, Tony, looks like it's probably a good one for you. It says, our consolidations take upwards of 30 minutes on average. What is the performance like compared to HFM?
Okay. Well, I'd say initial impressions after many implementations is very good. Obviously it's built on the S-based platform, and I guess it just depends. Just like with HFM, how many entities you're consolidating. That was the biggest driver on the HFM side of consolidation times, as well as the number of periods you have to consolidate. I can say that, I'd say on average, if you've got, let's say, 100 to 200 entities and you're consolidating a single period, you're probably looking at 2 minutes to consolidate. If you're doing a full year, maybe 15 to 20. And again, that might grow as you have more entities, right? But I think it's important to note that just like with HFM and planning and sort of the early days of those products, performance has evolved to where it is today, and it's always getting better.
Thank you, Tony. I don't think this next question is going to come as a surprise based on the poll question that you had. Several people, Tim here just most recently asked it, but we had a few people who asked this earlier. They're curious about features of HFM like process control and advanced ownership that are not available in FCCS. They want to know when they can expect that to be added. Rajesh, is that something you could take for us?
Sure, Susan. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I think pertinent to the question, like Tony mentioned, he did show kind of our future slide. Our goal is by September, we have parity with most of the HFM items that you've mentioned here. So today in our offices, we have a set of partners and consultants, including Perficient, that are testing out and validating some of these capabilities that we plan to release in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So we're very confident the capabilities like the ability to extend your dimensionality, the ability to configure your calculations, ownership management, be able to override translation rules, consolidation configuration options. Those all will be made available within the next 4 to 6 weeks. Additionally, as we are also releasing this concept of robotics automation as part of our close manager functionality. So you can imagine in FCCS as using the close calendaring capabilities, you'll be able to automate and orchestrate activities across cloud applications and against your on-premise offerings as well. And we do that all in mind with scalability and performance on the consolidation side. So an exciting time ahead of us. In the next 4 to 6 weeks, you will see most of these capabilities released.
Thank you, Rajesh. I've got a question here from Ravi. He is referring to the limit of 1,000 entities, and he wants to know when this limit will be increased.
I can take that one as well. So as part of the ability to extend the dimensionality, now you will be able to have up to 6 custom dimensions. We're actually changing the underneath version of our consolidation engine, which will be far more powerful and be able to give you additional expanded dimensionality. So our goal is really to now reach to the bigger enterprise class HFM customers and say, hey, FCCS is a viable option for you both from a performance standpoint with the size of the application you have, the dimensionality you have, things. So if you are on an older version of HFM, you're considering an upgrade to, let's say, 11.124, well, FCCS would be a viable option for you to consider as well.
Great, thank you. Kimberly has a question. How many HFM applications can you create in FCCS?
I'll take that one, Susan. So unlike HFM, where you have the ability to create many apps based on your license, this is a subscription, and you're subscribing to essentially an instance of a pre-built application. So you have one application available to you under that particular subscription, and if you needed today more HFM applications, you'd have to subscribe to another instance. So what we found is that we'd like to understand exactly why you have to have 2 applications and make a best practice recommendation around that. Sometimes that's for security reasons. Sometimes it's for granularity reasons. Sometimes HFM is being used kind of for the wrong purpose. So today, where it stands is you get one application per instance, and you have the ability to subscribe for more instances if you need them.
Thank you, Tony. I've got a question here from Bernardo. He says that there's a rate for euro to US dollar that exists. There's a rate from GBP to USD that exists. Can FCCS translate to euro from GBP without a direct rate?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like in HFM, it'll triangulate the rate and without having a direct rate.
Okay, great.
In fact, it goes beyond that, that all reporting currencies are translated at the same time and available to pull onto reports.
Thank you. Pat has a question for us. Pat would like to know if other dimensions such as customs impact consolidation time.
Rajesh, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, can I take that one? Yeah. So today they do, because underlying it is, if you know the S-based technology, there's a single cube today. But as I mentioned, when we expose extended dimensionality, those custom dimensions will then be, we're introducing this concept of hybrid, so those will not impact then the performance of the consolidation because those will be dynamically calculated.
Perfect, thank you. Christine would like to know, will users have the ability to build their own personal reports, or will you need developers to build reports for you in FCCS?
I'll take that one. So earlier in the presentation, we showed Financial Reporting Web Studio. That is how you develop new sort of print quality reports. very similar to the financial reporting client today for HFM. And from our perspective, with the minimum amount of training, business users can use this tool to create their own reports. They do not need developers. There's no coding involved. It's literally drag and drop and highlight, format, create some formulas. So very much in the sort of purview of business users to be able to develop their own reports. Now the system does come with some dashboards and reports built in, but nothing preventing you from creating more.
And Tony, if I could just add to that point, one of the differences between, and I own the development of HFM as well, so one of the differences that we have on our on-premise solutions is, though we have the same reporting solution even on on-premise and on the cloud, varies how you design a form, how you design a dashboard, etc., is different between planning and HFM on-premise. One of our design principles when going to the cloud is to get consistency across that. So not only the reporting solutions are the same, like the financial reports, SmartView, etc. On the cloud, the way you design a form in PBCS, then tax, in FCCS, etc., are exactly the same. The way you administer your PBCS, FCCS, TRCS, etc., exactly the same, right? It's really built on the same EPM cloud foundation infrastructure.
Thank you, Rajesh. I have another question here, and it looks like Robbie has a similar question from a couple of different folks. They want to know if there's any kind of migration utility available to move HFM to FCCS.
Tony, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take that. Again, today, no. I think there's been sort of a difference of opinion on this. First, it was, we don't need a migration utility, and I think Oracle's come around to seeing some of the value in that. But it's, again, farther out than the current R&D that's planned for September. From an implementation partner perspective, it's a tough thing to do, right? There's a lot of nuance into creating a migration utility for a product as different as HFM and FCCS. I'm not saying that Rajesh and his team can't pull it off, and they've got some pretty bright people on the task, I'm sure. But maybe consider the results of a migration utility very similar to how it worked for Enterprise to HFM. Yes, it could create some HFM dimensions and an HFM rule file and so on, but you would never probably stop there and consider that best practice. It's good for prototyping, but we'll see. I don't know. Rajesh, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think, Tony, I agree with what you said. It's a tough problem, right? And as Tony mentioned, right, we had the same issue when we went from Enterprise to HFM, and we created a migration utility for Enterprise to HFM. So you have Enterprise, I think it was 6.5. You had a Wizard migration utility that we had. You know how many people used it? Very low number of people. Because the thing is, it was an opportunity to redesign, to really see, well, what I have in Enterprise, does that really make sense in HFM? And the same thing I would urge for you guys. I've looked at many HFM applications. There's a lot of CRUD that's built in over years, right? And in FCCS, we've done a lot of out-of-box, right? You may not want to take the same kind of rules or same kind of data that you have in HFM onto a new implementation. So it's a consideration that you may want to rethink how you design that application. Having said that, all that, we will still make some tools available to at least do some of maybe the metadata migration, etc., simpler. But the rules one would be just much, much more difficult, right? Because a lot of those rules are built out of box in FCCS. You don't need to customize FCCS. You just really need to just configure it to meet your consolidation requirements.
So, Tony, we're about 15 minutes after the hour. I wanted to just ask you, are you good for another question, or you think maybe we've held people past the designated time and we can close and maybe follow up personally? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we, again, tried to cover a lot and cover it in depth. If we didn't get to your question, we'll be happy to follow up after the webinar and make sure you get your question answered. But I just wanted to say thank you to Rajesh for jumping in here for this last piece. Glad you could attend and participate. I wanted to say thank you to Susan for being our host, and again, we'd follow up with everyone who still has an open question after the call.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and close today's event. We do appreciate everyone who attended, and thank you for those of you who were able to stay past the hour. We do appreciate your time, and Rajesh, obviously, we very much appreciate your time to participate in the Q&A. That was very gracious of you to extend your time to do that. And as a reminder, once again, everyone, we will be sending the slides out, and we will be sending a recording of the event to you. It'll probably arrive sometime in your inbox tomorrow, but please do look for that. And as a reminder, we have an event that's coming up next month. It's Improve Your Business Processes with Oracle Order Management Cloud, and Perficient will be exhibiting at Oracle Open World in October. So we do hope to see you at the show. So drop us a line and stop by our booth if you're coming. And thank you again to both my speakers today, Santosh and Tony, and for Rajesh for stepping in during Q&A. We hope to see everyone online in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.